Retired master seamstress checking in. Not Bridezilla but Momzilla. I was making her daughter a custom bias cut gown and had limited fitting time because the bride lived one state over. Now bias cut gowns are the debut to begin with. Mom and I would work on details between fittings. I would say our working relationship got very frosty. Each time the bride came for a fitting she lost weight. Tape measures don't lie, and she was not a big girl to begin with. Mom would scream that her daughter did not lose any weight. After the third fitting, third fight, and the third rebuild of a very complicated gown, I finished it and told them to take the gown and do what they wanted with it. It was gorgeous but hung loose. The girl lost over 3 inches over the course of 7 to 8 weeks. I lost hours of my life, and the dollar for the work. The deposit took care of the materials, $140 per yard, silk, Venice lace, so there is that. I was at the wedding of an ex-boyfriend several years ago, and he had planned and practiced signing a Frank Sinatra song to his new wife. He went up and took the mic and, with the band backing him up, began singing the song. I can't remember what it was. His new wife suddenly stomped across the dance floor and up on the stage, grabbed the mic from him and said, "I hate the ducking song and I don't want to hear it." They were divorced about a year later. Wedding coordinator here. I found the moms are usually worse than the brides. I worked a wedding this past summer with a ridiculous momzilla. During the rehearsal, she handed me the box of decorations and said, "Don't you dare make this look tacky." On the day of the wedding, she arrived and came up to ask me where the wedding programs were. I told her there weren't any programs in any of the boxes, and she proceeded to witch me out for losing them, and then decided that I stole theme this year. She also asked that we build a water station for the guests, but instructed that she didn't want the guests to have access to it until after the ceremony. It was 90 degrees that day and the ceremony was outside, so that did not go over well. And when the guests complained that they were thirsty and we weren't letting them go to the water station, she told them how horrible we were and made a big deal out of opening the water station early, like she was the hero. Thank God they only booked the venue for the ceremony, so she was only my problem for about an hour. Part 2. The next day my boss handed me an email the momzilla sent her. She wrote about how I lost the programs, but then in the same sentence said she found the programs in her hotel room later that night and made a comment about how I should have gone to her hotel and gotten theme this year. She also complained about how I wouldn't give her guests water and how the photographer was the worst person she's ever worked with. She actually wrote, "Don't bother remembering her name. She'll never work in his town again," about the photographer. Her letter ended with her complimenting the venue space and saying something along the lines of, "I think I would be a great addition to your team of event coordinators. Let me know when I can start," which was blatantly trying to take my job. The worst part is that my boss actually hired her. Needless to say, I quit working at that venue. This isn't the worst story I have, but it's one of the most memorable. As a recent bride, I was taken aback by the presumptuousness of several wedding vendors about my role in wedding planning and my thinking solely because I was the bride. No dudes, I wanted to elope and my husband wanted the wedding. I used to work at a jewelry store. This young guy, college-aged, came in one day to look at engagement rings. Very polite, asking good questions. You could tell he'd been considering this for some time. As I'm helping him and showing him some rings in his budget, she walks in. She's wearing a t-shirt from the high school senior class from the previous year. And she comes over by him this year. "Oh my God, were you seriously considering that ring? Question mark. Question mark. Ugh, it's so ugly. Besides, it looks just like my last engagement ring." How I wish I could have told him to dump her. Run for the hills and don't look back. I am a florist and serviced a bridezilla and groom without a hitch on my end. On their end, they had to go out of state to get married because they had protective orders against each other. Baker here. I wasn't present for the freak out, but it was my fault. So, a few months back, I had a bride who wanted a navy to white ombre cake. Something like this. https://recipe.com/blue-ombre-cake-7535. Made with white sponge. Now, dark, rich colors like that in white cake ducking suck. They always taste terrible because they have so much gel coloring in them to get them right. However, you can do it, if they're willing to have the dark layers be chocolate. Navy is especially easy, thanks to blue velvet. I tell her this when we're planning. But I want white cake. I tell her I'll do all but the last few in white sponge. She agrees, and I make the damn thing and drop it off. I come back to pick up the staging stuff the next day, only to find my whole ducking cake sitting there. Apparently when they cut into the thing and fed it to each other, she freaked out over it being chocolate, and refused to let any of the cake be served. Apparently she forgot that she had agreed to have the bottom tier have 2 layers of blue velvet. So she threw a massive ducking temper tantrum over the cake being wrong, and how I ruined her wedding. Then locked herself in the bridal suite. If she wouldn't have been a little psychopath and let the staff cut the cake like they should have, she would have seen that 90% of the cake was white sponge like she wanted. I worked at a high-end bridal shop in my early 20s. One day, I had a bride-to-be shopping for a gown, and she had brought her mom, aunt, and sister, who had just become a new mom, with her to her appointment. The sister was obviously a little jealous that attention was no longer being lavished on her and her new baby, and instead the bride was now the center of attention. As I was fitting the bride in a $2,500 Lazaro bridal gown, the sister decided to change her newborn's diaper in the dressing room and proceeded to hold the stuff-filled diaper up to the gold-hued gown and exclaim, "Look, the colors almost match." I excused myself from the room for fresh air and to regain composure. In my experience, the brides were rarely the problem, the family was. I worked at a mom-pop shop. We had a bride who was Polish, who my boss called Polish Princess. She wasn't my bride, but they picked a very bad consultant for her. Made worse by the fact that this girl wanted stuff added to her dress that wasn't done by the manufacturer, so we had to do it all in-house. To give you an example, she wanted lights, those tube lights, I think that's what they are called, all around the bottom half of a dress that we had already spliced with 2 different dresses. Side note, my boss loved anything that meant money. Anywho, we spent months fixing and refitting this dress because she not only lost 45 pounds from her first time being measured, which brought her 4 dress sizes less than her original, she also got a massive boob job. Bridezilla. Well, after finally fitting her into her gown, on the last week she decided the lights that took our poor 70-year-old seamstress 2 months to sew in looked tacky. She was crying and throwing herself at her mother in a tantrum, screaming and polish all this crazy stuff. She ripped the bottom of the dress and ultimately had to buy a dress from David's Bridal because my boss finally got smart and kicked her out. Just a mess. She made our seamstress cry! Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. The witch. Not 30 minutes ago I had someone accuse our deaf tailor of recording her on his phone as she tried on dresses and walked around in them. He was FaceTiming his wife as he walked through the store. He was signing too. She was very embarrassed, but not enough to apologize to any of us for screaming through the store. I work at a hotel that does a huge amount of wedding business. And we had an engagement shower with the plan being that the couple would be having the wedding with us as well. This involved the bride-to-be and to an extent, her mother. Anyways, we knew there were going to be issues because neither the bride or groom ever smiled. She was always complaining about how he was wishy-washy with picking a date and he was always silent. The mob was your stereotypical Brooklyn Jewish mother and had her hand in everything to make sure things were perfect for her little princess. My experience has shown that the mob are exponentially worse than the actual people getting married. Well, the engagement party starts, and everyone, except for the couple, seemed to be having a great time. Then, halfway through the party, we suddenly heard the girl scream at her fiancé, "We will never have a Christmas tree in my house. So you can get over it." Quote. And from there it devolved into a shouting match between the couple, who moved from the banquet room to the lobby so their guests couldn't hear the argument. Didn't work. They heard everything. Part 2. Apparently she was Jewish and he was Protestant, and not once in their relationship had they discussed religion. They went at it on and off for 2 hours. She was screaming at the top of her lungs about how their non-existent children would be raised Jewish, and how his traditions didn't matter. Her mother standing at her side and nodding in agreement and interjecting occasionally with a "That's right," or "You tell him." He was pleading, in a good attempt to be quiet, but was obviously frustrated, for her to at least compromise to let him at least invite his pastor from his hometown for the wedding, in that their non-existent children could possibly do things with his parents for Christmas, even if they didn't celebrate. The guests just kept partying, pretending nothing was happening, but you could see on all of their faces that they wanted to leave, but couldn't since they would have to pass by the couple to get to the only exit. Part 3. Only after 2 hours and the argument eventually devolving into her insisting her children would never see a Christmas tree in their whole lives so they wouldn't be confused. Good luck with that one in this country, lady. The groom finally, dejectedly said, "Well then maybe this isn't going to work." She threw her ring at him and said, "I swear to God, then why the hell did you let me make you propose?" Quote. She then changed her mind, picked up the ring and said, "Whatever. I'm keeping this," and stormed off. Her mother looked at her ex-potential son-in-law, told him he was an idiot for letting her baby go, and went after her. I've never seen a banquet room clear of people so fast. Within 15 minutes, everyone was gone, and it was a ghost town. And from the looks of it, everyone took their gifts with theme this year. Worse still, it was the former bride's family who had hosted and were staying at the hotel. So we spent the next 2 days commiserating with them about how awful the groom was as they moved their daughter out of his apartment. Dude dodged a bullet. Not a wedding shop worker, but at the wedding when it happened. As she was walking up the aisle in her dress, the bride tripped over her gown. And instead of just getting up and moving on, she let loose an absolute huge tirade of cursing and screaming at everyone. When her dad tried to console her, she just got up, slugged her dad in the face, and started just throwing stuff everywhere, screaming about this mother-ducking wreck of a day. "I'll kill that Notch for making the gown too long. What ain't you looking at, Earl? Your Notch of a wife is a whore." She just lost it and proceeded to rip up her own dress and run out of the church half naked into the rain. I mean, I know the stress is high, but god damn, she lost her ducking mind. Bridal consultant here. My most memorable appointment was a party that showed up completely stuffed as to the wind hammered. It wasn't unusual for bridal parties to have a little tailgate-style party in our parking lot before coming into our store. Often they'd have mimosas or a shot or two to loosen up before the scary gown search. This party must have finished a full bottle of whiskey between the 5 of them this year. They didn't appear too sloppy when we first got started, but about half an hour into the appointment, it was pretty obvious that they were way too drunk to be in the setting they were in. I had to prop the bride up with her nose in the corner of her fitting room to lace her corsets, because she couldn't stand. And each time we stepped out onto the stage, the bridesmaids would scream, Beatlemania style, until they were red in the face. Eventually my manager came to me and said, very sternly, sell this girl and get Themis out of here. The appointment ended when she fell for a gown $700 over budget. Her drunkest bridesmaid swiped her own credit card to cover it. And then one of them, not sure which, sprayed a brown bodily fluid of some kind over our entire toilet.